So here we are, a relatively immature species struggling with possible self-destruction. If aligning with the torus does hold the key to a new form of clean, safe energy access, imagine the implications. This could be the most important technology breakthrough of our times. So who wouldn't want to have an energy source that's unlimited and freely available? That turned out to be a key question. And that's what led me down the next rabbit hole. It turns out that scientists as far back as the early 1900s have been developing alternative ways to access electricity without combustion. Nikola Tesla believed he had tapped into what he called radiant energy. Many scientists believe he was accessing what's now called free energy. But before Tesla could finish the project, his financier, banker J.P. Morgan, who had a monopoly on the copper used for electrical lines, recognized how Tesla's invention could transmit electricity without wires. He then shut down Tesla's funding. Tesla's lab was burned down and he was ostracized, all for trying to implement his vision of unlimited energy for everyone. A modern-day inventor, Adam Trombly, was inspired by Tesla's work and by the possibilities of the torus. Trombly built a dynamo, a direct current generator that accessed electrical power right out of the air.
We were trying to demonstrate that by mimicking the magnetic field of a planet and rotating this device, we could actually create a dynamo that would work. And in fact, it did work, and it does work. So when we contemplate nature, when we contemplate Jupiter, or we contemplate a dynamo like the Earth rotating in space, we're basically talking about a magnet which is rotating in space. And the lines of flux of the magnet are pouring down and through in this toroidal pattern of the magnetic field. It's also expanding and contracting. It's breathing. It's taking in the energy of space literally and transforming it. Right here in this toroid, we have enough energy to transform the entire Earth. And that's not just a theoretical statement, it's literally true. To contemplate the implications of this means that every single place on Earth suddenly has power. Every single person on Earth suddenly has power. We have universal abundance.
Trombly had been invited to demonstrate one of his generators at the United Nations and the US Senate. But these events were undermined by the first Bush administration. Then the device itself was taken in a government raid. Trombly's experience isn't unique. Almost every time I found an inventor with a promising new technology in the field of free energy, he told a similar story of suppression. Inventor John Bedini began working with Tesla's theories of radiant energy decades ago and has produced an assortment of battery charging devices that generate more energy than it takes to run them. He announced that he was going to start offering them at low cost. Soon after that, he was attacked in his lab and warned not to produce the devices. For his own safety, he had to let go of marketing free energy. These are all devices from labs I personally visited.
Now.
Now, the quality of this footage is obviously poor, and I'm not expecting this to convince you. My point is that being there with these inventors, accompanied by experts, and seeing these new energy devices in operation convinced me that the technology is real. And the implications of that to me are absolutely thrilling. Canadian John Hutchison not only created some free energy batteries, but also used Tesla's theories to counter gravity, to make objects float. This could revolutionize the field of propulsion. His lab was raided and equipment was taken by police and government officials in 1978, 1989, and again in 2000. One of the scientists we were going to interview for this film was Dr. Eugene Malov, an engineer from MIT and Harvard, and editor of Infinite Energy magazine, which covers both theoretical and technological developments in the new energy field. Dr. Malov was mysteriously beaten to death in 2004.
We've had major military people at great risk to themselves say, yes, these things are real. Why do you think the military-industrial complex doesn't want that statement to be made? Because you start thinking about what kind of technology is behind that. That's the bottom line.
The energy is extracted from the fabric of the space around us, which means it cannot be metered. That is a direct threat to the single largest industry in the world. Energy. It's goodbye ExxonMobil, goodbye oil, goodbye coal, goodbye linear transmission of electricity through power lines, all that gone. Unfortunately, it's someone's $200 trillion piggy bank. The proven oil and gas and coal reserves are worth north of $200 trillion. This information coming out would completely change geopolitical power more than anything since, well, in recorded human history. And it would happen in a generation.
I started to examine the breakthrough solutions, and much to my surprise, these concepts have been proven in hundreds of laboratories throughout the world, and yet they have not really seen the light of day.
Rather than smashing things together and trying to control the explosion, these new technologies rely on blending, of dancing with what naturally is. The common denominator of all the free energy devices I've seen is that they mimic in one way or another the torus energy shape. You don't have to believe in free energy technology to be concerned about the repression of ideas and inventions. I found myself thinking, what better way to justify our dependence on oil, coal, nuclear, and other dangerous and dirty technologies than to claim there are no better, cheaper alternatives? It was my beloved wife and creative partner, Kimberly, who kept bringing me back to the human implications of my scientific research.
For me, as intriguing as the torus and ETs and free energy are, the most compelling question was, would understanding these things really help alleviate human suffering in any way? And it turns out it can. So much of the pain on the planet has to do with the lack of access to energy. Can you stay warm? Can you get food and water? Can you get hospital care? All that has to do with energy access. If there is a fundamental pattern, which makes sense to me that evolution would be efficient in that way, and we can align with that pattern to create new technologies that will solve these problems, then it's worth it to me to open my mind to these socially taboo subjects.
If the new energy technologies were to be set free worldwide, the change would be profound. It would affect everybody. It would be applicable everywhere. These technologies are absolutely the most important thing that's happened in the history of the world.
The idea that civilizations progress from a primitive state to a more advanced one is a fallacy that evolutionists try to apply to history. If one abandons evolutionist nonsense and prejudice and looks at the historical references and findings with an unbiased mind, what one encounters is civilizations that used highly advanced technologies. Remains left from ancient Egypt, the Mayans, and the Sumerians indicate the branches of science such as electricity, electrochemistry, electromagnetics, metallurgy, hydrogeology, medicine, chemistry, and physics were used to a considerable extent. Electricity was efficiently generated and widely utilized in ancient Egypt. The Baghdad battery and the first arc lights were used at that time. But was electrical generation limited to these in ancient Egypt? A careful examination of Egyptian history immediately reveals the sophistication in perfect illumination. No soot has been found in the corridors of the pyramids or the tombs of the kings, because these areas were lit using electricity. Relief carvings show that the Egyptians used handheld torches powered by cable-free power sources. The arc lamp used in the lighthouse of Alexandria is further proof that electricity was used in ancient Egypt. The energy required to power the lighthouse of Alexandria for 24 hours a day could only have been supplied by a regular electrical source. The pyramids of Egypt were giant power plants generating electricity. 1. The outer casing of the Great Pyramid was covered with white tufa limestone, so tightly built that not even a razor blade could fit between the blocks. The white tufa limestone does not contain magnesium and has high insulating properties. This insulation property prevented the electricity inside the pyramid from being released without control. 2. The stone blocks used inside the pyramid were made of another form of limestone, containing crystal and a small amount of metal, which allow for maximum power transmission. The shafts inside the pyramid were lined with granite. Granite is a slightly radioactive substance and permits the ionization of the air inside these shafts. When we look at an insulated electric cable, we see that conductive and insulation materials are used in the same way as in the pyramids. 3. The conductive and insulating properties of the pyramid are an example of flawless engineering. However, a source of energy is needed for electricity generation. The Giza plateau where the pyramids stand is full of underground water channels. The pyramids rise above the limestone layers, the spaces between them being full of water. These special layers of rock that transmit electricity upward as they carry underground water to the surface are known as aquifers. The high volume flow of the River Nile that passes through these aquifers produces an electric current. This is known as physioelectricity. The pyramids' underground chambers are granite conductors built within the rock charged with physioelectricity. This electric current is conducted directly to the upper part of the pyramid's granite, covered subterranean chambers. Granite is a very good conductor of electricity. The electromagnetic field that forms at the bottom of the pyramid is transmitted in concentrated form to the upper layers of the pyramid. On the top of the pyramid there was a gold capstone, gold being an excellent conductor of electricity. This section is no longer there in our day. This means the top of the pyramid has lost its structure of flawless geometry. This gold capstone facilitated a conductive path for the transfer of negative ions to the ionosphere. This way, a current was generated. How does it serve to move the electromagnetic field on the ground through the help of an aquifer? An identical form of this technology, employed in Egypt 5,000 years ago, was used by Nikola Tesla, an inventor of electric technology in the early 1900s, in a tower he constructed in the United States of America. Tesla, the inventor of such fundamental electric technology as the alternating current, electric engine, radio, the laser, and radar, was successful in simultaneously transmitting sound and pictures between continents in the Wardenclyffe Tower he built between 1901 and 1917. He used an external source of electricity for this, and even applied wireless power transmission technology. Tesla had also built his tower above an aquifer and discharged the negative ions from the aquifer to the tower. The electromagnetic technology used in Tesla's famous tower is identical to the electromagnetic field set up in the construction of the pyramids. Both systems generate negative ions and transmit them without the need for electric cables. So for what purpose did the Egyptians use electricity? Relief carvings clearly show that the Egyptians used hand-held bulb-type lamps powered by a cable-free electric source. These bulbs are reminiscent of Nikola Tesla's descriptions to show that his alternating current was safe. At the 1893 Chicago World's Fair, Tesla transmitted alternating electric current through his body to light a bulb he held in his hand without using electric cables. This relief carving shows a wireless antenna. The Egyptians used the antenna and cable-free energy for wireless communication. In the relief on the left is a carved transmitter with a receiver on the left. This evidence indicates that the Egyptians used free wireless energy for communication purposes. This relief carving shows a yarn manufacturing facility. The yarn Egyptians used for their fabrics at that time were as fine as those manufactured by machinery today. The Egyptians also used electric power in their weaving plants. It was seen that many gold objects which have remained from ancient Egypt were in fact very finely gold-plated. Such perfect gold plating as in these pieces requires the use of electricity. The total electromagnetic measurement made around the Great Pyramid is identical to that made during a thunderstorm with lightning. There's a powerful electromagnetic field around the Great Pyramid. This may be observed through a simple experiment when standing at the top of the pyramid with a bottle wrapped in a damp cloth. Sparks fly away from the bottle as if one were on top of a high-voltage bobbin. The pyramids were not used as tombs. The pyramids have always been interpreted as the tombs of the pharaohs, but in fact no inscriptions of any kind appear in the corridors of the Great Pyramid. This suggests a functional building rather than a mausoleum. An empty stone chest was found on the central axis of the pyramid that archaeologists call the King's Chamber. They claimed that this contained the coffin of the pharaoh, but that since this had been stolen, it was now empty. But the examination of the dimensions of the stone chest and the special location in which it was installed reveals a different state of affairs. That point is just where the missing part of the pyramid's conductive structure and whole design suggests it should be. If a superconductive material was installed here, the pyramid could manufacture enough electricity for all of Egypt. This superconductor is thought to have been the Ark of the Covenant, which was known to have been in Egypt in ancient times, and whose dimensions are just right to fit inside the stone chest. The prophet Moses, peace be upon him, was adopted by Pharaoh, and according to historic records, was raised as an administrator because of his superior moral values, intelligence, and abilities. One of the phases in leadership training in ancient Egypt was the teaching of all the secrets of Egypt and the knowledge of energy. In addition to its other properties, there are also various references to the Ark of the Covenant serving as a capacitor, and that this was the source of Egypt's energy. The prophet Moses, peace be upon him, is known to have taken the Ark of the Covenant with him when he fled Egypt. According to historic references, one of the reasons why Pharaoh chased the prophet Moses, peace be upon him, right up to the last moment and strove to catch him at whatever price was the Ark of the Covenant, because Pharaoh was aware that all the glory and magnificence of Egypt would be lost without electricity. Historic references also show that Egyptian civilization reached its peak during the reign of Ramses II, who lived at the same time as the prophet Moses, peace be upon him. But those civilizations collapsed in less than 10 years after Ramses II, and Giza was even abandoned. The city, once the center of civilization, remained deserted until the next dynasty settled there. Were the Egyptians the only society to utilize wireless electrical technology? The relief carvings left by the Mayan and Assyrians also contain images of similar techniques to those implied in the pyramids. All this information once again goes to demonstrate that there were no primitive people and societies in the past, as evolutionists would have us believe. In terms of civilization, more or less developed communities have lived side by side at all times throughout history. A society that existed thousands of years ago enjoyed a far more advanced technology compared to one living in the 20th century. And this shows us that development is not part of an evolutionary process. In other words, that there is no linear advancement from a primitive level of civilization to a more developed one in history.
Scientists have discovered that the Earth's crystal structure can impose its patterns into the liquid media of the oceans and on up into the atmosphere. What the scientists will have to discover is the wisdom of the Atlantean technology of the standing column of wave and solitron energy fields. The Tesla coil, as well as structures such as the pyramid, are simple antennas designed to activate the grid system and power the world with inexpensive energy. The secret of generating power from the worldwide grid system is to develop a way to properly tune the pyramid or coil antenna. At the present time, this is not achieved because our scientists have not studied the power source called the world grid. They have failed to see the simple truth of investigating the power source and building a simple antenna to tap into the grid. The ancient people used the grid to achieve levitation and worldwide communication. This is why pyramids are found all over the world. The Cheops pyramid in Egypt is a coil generator and was built to tap into the grid. The main control panel for this coil was the Ark of the Covenant. Beneath the Great Pyramid was a flooded area. Its purpose was to set up a ground plane. The primary coil was designed into the pit area and the secondary coil was developed between the pit and the king's chamber. The capstone was the discharge point, where the Tesla coil is designed in the same proportions as the coil that is built into the Great Pyramid. A solitron energy pattern is discharged from the capstone.
Right now we have the entrenched energy monopolies and cartels. You know, we have OPEC and we have the 7 sister oil companies that control all the oil and energy. But what people have to understand is that the people who run the energy business in this world, which is the biggest business on the planet, turning over $4 to $5 trillion a year, it's bigger than guns and drugs, it's bigger than defense. They control the newspapers, they control the governments. But these companies are so big that they regulate the government, which regulates them.
The history of science is the history of the suppression of great inventions. A few classic stories. Nikola Tesla.
Nikola Tesla is regarded as the founding father of free energy. His astounding developments in the generation of alternating electrical current are still being used today. His most notorious project involved the transmission of wireless electricity into the atmosphere, which allowed for unlimited power to be freely accessed by everyone. When his financial backer, J.P. Morgan, realized that this power system could not be metered, all funding was immediately withdrawn. Tesla's electrical broadcast towers were dismantled, and through Morgan's many close connections with the media and government, Tesla's career was destroyed.
And that situation still exists in the United States today, where a person that really understands what's going on just can't get their idea out because the alternative science and medical fields have been co-opted by the intelligence services.
Even Dr. Townsend T. Brown, the electrogravitic research scientist, has on his 16-millimeter film of his lab test, which we've got here, he has guys with the black suits and black hats come into the place. You can see where the legends come from. I mean, these guys come in and they look like, you know, Bad Bart to Black Man. I mean, it's classic, and these things do happen.
And why are we still on oil? I think we're on oil because, and coal and nuclear power, because there has been an active, longitudinal, long-term suppression of really advanced sciences and technologies. There are 5,135 patents that have been seized under the National Security Act. And I think that this has created both a geopolitical emergency and a geophysical emergency. Whether you believe in global warming or not, you cannot have 7 billion people burning oil and gas and coal indefinitely. Whereas there are advanced technologies dealing with the physics of zero-point energy, so that every home and car would have a generator pulling energy out of the fabric of space-time, and you would never have to burn another drop of oil.
Why are we not there? Why are we doing that?
Because there has been active suppression of this information. As Mr. Shin reported, there are people on my team who have been threatened. There is a man working on one of these devices for my group. We provided some grant funding, and about two or 3 years ago, a former CIA director, who I don't want to talk about, with a group of people went down there and threatened him and his wife if he didn't stop. So this is a man who's attached to IT and does contract work for the CIA. The part of the technology that deals with energy generation should come out and has also been suppressed for reasons mainly of macroeconomic stability, because, as you know, part of the national security discussion has always been these would be highly disruptive technologies, to which I say, well, good, you want to be disrupted now or later when we go through a terminus with the environment melting down around us. We have got to make these hard decisions. And in the French government, we've had discussions about this. They know that some of these objects are of extraterrestrial origin. They know that some of them are man-made. And the Lockheed Skunk Works, and some of my witnesses and sources work in the famous Skunk Works. And I will tell you that Ben Rich, who headed up the Lockheed Skunk Works, said before he died, and we have a witness to this comment, that we, quote, already have the technologies to take ET home. In other words, we already have at the Skunk Works interstellar capable technologies.
We're being told now that we have to, in the face of extraordinary physical crises of energy, the lifeblood of civilization, without which everybody becomes poor or dead quickly, we're told we have to drill for something which is ridiculous and primitive as oil.
When they have plenty of advanced technologies, they've admitted...
there's incredible advanced technology. So the end game, one of the end games, is if you control people's sustenance, if you control the energy in which they live, the resources which they utilize, and the information under which they operate, you control them totally.
It's not free. Nothing is free. But cheap and efficient energy exchange is a viable concept.
Now I say that everything in this universe is free energy. It's been dreamed of for hundreds of years that somewhere, someplace, as Tesla said, man will hook his machinery to the very wheelwork which drives the universe itself.
You know, if you invent a better mousetrap, you know, the world may be to pass to your door. If you invent a free energy machine, there'll be a path beat to your door, but you don't want those people there.
Conventional science recognizes that all matter, each molecule of everything on Earth and beyond, oscillates at its own distinct frequency.
Can the amplified voice of Ella Fitzgerald shatter this glass?
The atoms that come together to form a molecule are held together with an energy bond that both emits and absorbs its own specific electromagnetic frequency. No two species of molecules have the same electromagnetic oscillations or energetic signature. By increasing the intensity of the harmonic frequency of the molecular structure of the wine glass, science can cause the glass to shatter.
Believe it.
This is a commonly accepted law of nature, so why can't other molecules be isolated and destroyed in the same way? Why can't the oscillation frequencies of killer viruses like cancer and AIDS be identified and destroyed? Why hasn't someone performed the research? Well, someone has. Royal Raymond Rife was a brilliant scientist who was born in 1888 and died in 1971. His studies at Johns Hopkins University led to his development of the technologies that are still commonly used today in the fields of optics, electronics, radiochemistry, biochemistry, ballistics, and aviation. he received 14 major awards and honors, including an honorary doctorate from the University of Heidelberg. During the 30 years that Rife spent designing and building medical instruments, he worked for Zeiss Optics, the U.S. government, and several private benefactors. Because Rife was self-educated in so many different fields, he intuitively looked for his answers in areas beyond the rigid scientific structure of his day. He had mastered so many different disciplines that he literally had at his intellectual disposal the skills and knowledge of an entire team of scientists and technicians from a number of different scientific fields. So whenever new technology was needed to perform a new test, Rife simply invented and then built it himself. In 1920, Rife began investigating the possibilities of treating disease with electricity. He discovered that each disease he studied had different electrical characteristics and started subjecting these organisms to different electrical frequencies. His first virus microscope complete, Rife performed tens of thousands of lab tests in an effort to isolate the microorganism that caused tuberculosis. Traditional scientific procedure requires the staining of samples to make them visible under the microscope. Unfortunately, the minuteness of the viruses made them impossible to stain with the existing acid-based stains. Rife conceived a method of staining the samples with light and began building a microscope that would enable the frequency of light to correspond with the electrical frequency of the microorganism under observation. His cancer research began in 1922, but it would take until 1932, after thousands of tests, that he was able to isolate the microorganism which he named the BX virus. By 1933, he had perfected that technology and had constructed the incredibly complex universal microscope, which is capable of magnifying objects 60,000 times their normal size. With this incredible microscope, Rife became the first human being to actually see a live virus. Until quite recently, the universal microscope was the only microscope able to view a live virus. Rife painstakingly identified the individual spectroscopic signature of each microbe. Colleagues of Rife reported his incredible patience, sitting at the microscope many times for over 24 hours straight without a break. Once he discovered the oscillation rate of a particular organism, Rife concentrated on refining his method of destroying it. He used the same principle to kill the virus as he had used to make the organism visible: light frequency resonance. By increasing the intensity of a frequency that resonated naturally within these microbes, Rife increased their natural oscillations until they distorted and disintegrated from structural stresses without harming the surrounding tissue. Rife called this frequency the mortal oscillatory rate, or MOR. Half a century later, doctors began using a like technology known as lithotripsy, where kidney stones are destroyed with high-energy shock waves. Identify the MOR of cancer cells, turn up the volume and destroy them without damaging the host organism. It sounds like a scientific miracle, but will it work on the human body?
In 1934, a clinical study was set up at the Scripps Annex. Now, this is the Scripps Ranch. It was owned by Ellen Scripp. And there they set up a clinical study under the auspices of Dr. Milbank Johnson. And they had a team of physicians that examined terminal cancer patients. Every one of those patients was declared terminal by their group of scientists that was involved in this study. Dr. Rife would take some of the blood, examine, find the particular frequency for that organism for that patient, tune that instrument to the patient. Within 2 months, 14 of the 16 patients were declared cured by this team of physicians. It took another 6 weeks to cure the remaining 2. 100% cure rate.
University of Oslo, 1935. While continuing to teach and develop his innovative therapeutic techniques, Reich began a series of laboratory experiments to verify the existence of a physical, biological energy expressed in the emotions. Using human subjects, Reich was able to demonstrate a charge at the skin surface directly related to feelings of pleasure or anxiety. The charge would increase when a subject experienced pleasure and decrease during feelings of unpleasure. From this, Reich concluded that pleasure is the movement of biological energy toward the periphery of the organism, while anxiety is the movement of this energy toward the center. He assumed this energy to be electrical. But was it? And did similar energy processes exist in more basic life forms? Reich discovered that under certain conditions, sterilized and unsterilized substances such as grass, blood, sand, charcoal, and foodstuffs disintegrate into pulsating vesicles that exhibit a bluish color. He called these vesicles bions. Reich observed internal motility in the bions, an effect of energy. He also found that certain bions revealed a strong radiation phenomenon, seen here as a white field around the organism, and that these bions could kill bacteria and cancer cells. This radiation confirmed the existence of an energy that did not obey any known laws of electricity or magnetism. Reich called this energy orgone because its discovery had evolved from his investigation of the orgasm function, and because this energy could charge organic matter. When he published his findings, the scientific and psychiatric communities responded with a vicious year-long attack in the Norwegian press. In the wake of this response, and the inevitability of a Second World War, Reich began to look to America as the future home for his work. In August 1939, Reich sailed for America on the last ship to leave Norway before World War II broke out.